Hi, my name is Ricardo, and in this video we're going to talk about the key legal and governance issues that should be addressed in your organization's funding proposal. So the first change relates to the changes that were made to legislation in South Africa, especially in 2023. A lot of those changes are relevant to non-profit organizations, so your organization should be able to demonstrate in its funding proposal that it has taken into account those changes and, where applicable, has ensured that the organization is compliant with the legislative changes. So, for example, if the organization is required to be registered in terms of the amended provisions of the NPO Act, then the organization must provide some indication that it has made that assessment and then also that it has registered. Or if you've concluded that it's not applicable in your context, provide some indication in your funding proposal just to indicate to donors that you are actually aware of the changes that have happened and the organization has internalized the relevant amendments that were made to the legislation. The second issue relates also to legislation, but this is specific legislation, and this is now the Protection of Personal Information Act. Now, there's been a lot of developments, and what is clear is that the information regulator, which is responsible for the regulation and oversight of the Protection of Personal Information Act, has now taken an approach that is more focused on enforcement. I think previously it was more focused on education, but now it is more focused on enforcement, and there are some changes that have been introduced. So, for example, a new guidance note has been published on the issue of direct market. Also, the information regulator is now integrated with the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission in terms of reporting on the PIA reports and also illustrating whether or not information officers are in fact registered. So from that perspective, there are a host of compliance obligations under the Protection of Personal Information Act, and the organization should ensure that in its funding proposal that it provides some indication that it has actually considered and is compliant with the provisions of the POPIA. Now, some proposals I've seen, organizations would insert pictures of children. Now, if you do that, make sure that you have obtain the necessary consent, and consent has got a specific definition. So also make sure that your consent is compliant with the definitional requirements of POPIA, which is not so straightforward in my view. But the organization, if you do that, make sure that you are compliant in that regard. The next issue is about CFT and AML measures. Now, South Africa has been grey listed, and that's because South Africa did not have the required measures in place as stipulated by the Financial Action Task Force. Recommendation 8 specifically refers to non-profit organization, and there's been a lot of developments regarding that space in the South African context. So it's important for the organization to make sure that it has taken those recommendations and measures into account. So, for example, the National Risk Assessment relating to non-profit organizations, your organization should have engaged with that. Provide your donors with some indication that you've done that, and if any measures were introduced, any risk assessments were done pursuant to that assessment, the national assessment, then you should indicate to your donors that you've actually taken that into account. Another key governance issue that's important is King 5. That is now on the radar. Now, I know a lot of organizations are saying, look, King 5 or King 4, not applicable to us. So I think that's an easy way out, and perhaps, that was historically accurate. The question is whether it is still accurate today, and so the organization has to engage with that. To what extent, it should be applicable to the organization, especially if you're looking at raising funds from the corporate sector. Now, that's the language that they understand in the corporate sector, and so if you don't engage with that, it's perhaps a missed opportunity. Lastly, reporting, and that's related to the King report, which talks about integrated reporting, and I think there's a lot of scope in terms of the integrated reporting to address issues of governance and legal compliance. So if the organization has perhaps adopted a new version of its annual report that is more linked to integrated reporting, perhaps that's an issue also to address in your funding proposal. Now, in conclusion, of course, I am recommending that as an organization you actually engage with those issues. So you don't insert information in a proposal merely to comply with donor expectations. I think prior to your funding proposal, the organization should have engaged with these issues, and those issues should be also addressed in the funding proposal to illustrate to potential donors that you've actually engaged with the those relevant issues, the legal and the governance issues. So I hope this video has been helpful. If it has, please like, please subscribe, and click on the notification icon if you want to receive further videos like this. Thank you.